level as well. That same procedure, that same rubric, to go through a logic model of how you decompose an initiative or an objective into some smaller pieces to figure out how people fit into that, that's perfectly valid. However, I would also tell you that that's not the only technique you could use to break down a tier 2 initiative or objective into something that somebody can grab onto and try to do. It is a way, but it's not the only way. There's lots of different techniques, and your leadership and yourselves, based on your own experience in project management or strategic planning or any other kind of methodology, you got to find a methodology that works for you.
And I think that's a great point about making sure that you tie in to, as an individual, tie into the strategic plan. How many of you out there in the Pacific have actually seen or understand what the tier 1 looks like, or what the tier 2, or understand that we are formulating the tier 2 for the informed line of business? Or how many of you even understand what informed line of business is, or what the line of businesses are for our?
We're using this term. Clear. Also, tier 1.
Yeah. Please clarify, please.
Say that. I'm sorry. Say that again. So please clarify. Okay, clarify line of business.
Yeah. So for AFRTS writ large, you operate in 2 broad lines of business. Basically, you're broadcasting things, but why are you doing that? You're doing it for 2 reasons. Number 1, to inform your audience of some important information that your clients want them to know. And second, you're broadcasting to entertain people who are watching those programs. Those are 2 lines of business. Those are 2 purposes for doing what we do. In the Pacific, I know, one of the objectives at the tier 2 and tier 1 levels in each one of the tiers is probably going to be improving client satisfaction. And we're already working on that out in the Pacific. Rusty, the work you've done to start collecting up client assessments through your meetings, that's exactly the type of thing that is appropriate under the balanced scorecard, and you're already kind of doing it. So on that particular aspect of it, you're probably not going to be doing anything new, but if you're doing that already, you've probably already told your subordinates out there to do it, so it's probably on their performance plans or whatever their analogous thing is for military service. So it's you're already doing some of it, you just don't quite know the connection to the high-level strategy yet.
So very quickly, we have lines of business in which we are aligned with what our mission, what our entertain, publish Stars and Stripes, manage VI, and then I'm forgetting some.
Train, support.
Train individuals, which is predominantly DIMPOs, and provide support, and then
Provide media services and technologies.
Provide media services and technology. I always get that one mixed up. So those are our 7 basic lines. Those are our 7 lines of business. And some of them, as you have already surmised, fall directly in line by component, but inform crosses a couple of components. So, and therefore, that's, I think, part of the confusion out there, out in the Pacific and other areas, not here at Fort Meade. So I just wanted to make sure you understand the language so that as we go forward, and we talk about change, which is what we're going to go to next. We're going to talk about change and fear, and how we're communicating that change. How are we communicating what we're doing here in our strategic plan? Has it been effective for you? Are you understanding it? And if you don't, what questions do you have about communicating that change? What scares you the most? Or maybe you're not scared. Let's hear from the AFN Pacific, our outer regions. What do you think about that?
you guys have and then put it into action. I mean, you know, we've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of great talk, but it's time to put stuff into action. I mean, that's how we see if this works or not.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just, you know, you talk about all the different things that we're doing, all the different lines. So I'm a station manager, but I just got done with PHUC at Dinfos. So I've experienced, you know, quite a bit of all the different things to include the training part. And as it stands right now, I really think we have a great product in DMA. I mean, I've been through the training part, and I've seen the, you know, everybody from people going through PHUC to the senior level courses to the brand new airmen, you know, and other troops coming out of the you know, initial training programs. I mean, we've got really, really great programs. And I think, you know, one of the big things is while we're talking about all of this, we also have to focus on the technological aspect, because that's where the biggest change is going to take place. We have to focus a lot on, if we're going to change DMA, how are we going to change the technology to go along with it, to basically make it competitive with the commercial marketplace that we're dealing with. Your, you know, video on demands, your streaming sites, and all that other kind of stuff.
Okay, so let me paraphrase what you're asking. What are we doing to make sure we stay technologically on par with what's happening around us and what our customers want? Is that your question?
Well, I mean, I'm saying, what are we, you know, when are we putting all this into action?
Okay, valid question. Anyone in the room want to address that?
Let me not answer it specifically, because that's going to take us a little bit of time. But let's talk for a second, Master Sergeant, if we could, about how we can tell you this, which I think is really kind of more important in the long term. I had a thought a moment ago. Is anybody out there familiar with the infographic that I think it was Tech Sergeant Heidi West did over at Dinfos on the process? Anybody seen that thing? It's like one of those little USA Today pipeline graphs, you know?
What is it? Say again?
Have you seen that?
We send it over here, Nathan. Yeah, is it the tier 1, 2, and 3 on it?
Yeah. So some people have seen that. I don't wonder if we don't need kind of a way to graphically show everybody where we're at in the process right now. We talk about it an awful lot in the boardroom, and probably to the point where we may assume that everyone's getting the word, but maybe not. And it doesn't need to be terribly detailed. And often that part of the meeting happens after, when we stop talking about things that are in the staff notes, which most of you guys probably get an email from corporate communications. So, to explain to you where each of the components is at in this process of developing a Tier 2 plan, racking and stacking initiatives, passing that down to Tier 3 to assess where their parts of the workforce potentially fit into that. We need to find a way to communicate that clearly, perhaps graphically, so you know when to be ready, you know, what to expect. Second part of that, I guess, when you talk about technology, there are lots of concepts that run through both DMA Tier 1 and the lines of business at Tier 2 that address technology and a lot of different aspects that you're talking about. So what you'll see when you see the scorecard for, I guess for you it's probably Inform, you're going to see something on there that says something like improved technology. But that's the Tier 2 version of that for that particular line of business. It's, of course, the one at DMA level is oriented, as you would expect, at a much higher level at the enterprise level. So what's probably needed, I guess, so you can understand the context of what's happening, is to push what we have for scorecards, because the scorecards have been final for a while, and make sure, you know, kind of maybe go around the horn to all of us and make sure that our workforce has at least seen the scorecards, and not, and I don't, you know, for whatever reason, and not feel like we're holding those hostage, waiting on like the initiatives, which is the how you do the objective. Yeah. So let us take another whack at, again, how to get that information to you and where we're at on the planning process, and then push the push the scorecards one more time. And actually all of them, because even for mine, for Managed VI, I actually own objectives over in Mr. Benito's technology one. So whichever ones are appropriate, we should circle that back. Is that a good way ahead for you?
For me, I mean, fair,
You and anyone else who wants to eat the microphone here.
No, I mean, yeah, fair enough. I mean, definitely fair enough.
This is Barbara Gerfine. A note on that from a couple of previous sessions. A couple of people were kind of asking what you're saying. So someone said, is there a repository for this information that we could find it? You know, where's the one point I can go to where even if, you know, when the colonel or whoever, Mike, sends this out, that it isn't a one-time email that you go, oh, I remember this, but I can't find it in my email. You know, the website, a lot of it's on the Facebook page, but we'll get back to everyone in terms of here's the one place you can go where all of this resides if you want to look at it, you know, more frequently or down the road. The other thing is, for individuals, one of the places that you can start, even though we're not quite there yet, is looking at their IDPs and looking at their critical elements in terms of how they're going to connect into those initiatives and those lines of business. Because if they haven't looked at those initiatives and they don't know what they are yet, that would be a good place to start.
I think we're looking, I mean, we're not at the point of executing these initiatives. And when we say initiative, I want to use the word project, because really that's what an initiative is, right? It's a project that we're going to start building or executing. I mean, I know that we're at the point of starting to kind of plan those projects, but, you know, we're not at that point yet to make those projects go. I think it's just down the line. And you know, I think like Colonel Kelch said, is finding a better way to communicate out through the field of where are we at these points is really, I think, the best place we can get to right now.
Some are moving and some aren't. It just depends on the scope of them.
Sure.
But there's names attached to a lot of these things already, particularly in Tier 1. We know who had the rose pinned on them to Honcho it, and people ought to know that. Seems to me, Mike, that this discussion and other discussions keeps leading us back to the fact that the communications team is probably long overdue for another meeting to figure out how to get after some of the things that Mash Sarner and others are bringing up here.
Yeah, it's go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Rusty. I think one of the challenges of trying to communicate it without us having, I don't know, 21 straight days of everyone in a room and going over strategy is.
That was fantastic.
Maybe,
You know you love that.
Maybe we look at when we try to communicate the strategies and initiatives, take it from the standpoint of the employee trying to perform a task versus looking at it from a SES level. Mr. Shepard, this is what he's got to push out in terms of his goals and objectives, but how we communicate it, try to flip it upside down to make it relate.
I totally agree, Rusty. And you know, the other part of that too is, and this is true for all of us. Some of us have done balanced scorecard before. Some of us haven't. It's going to take some time also for the vocabulary of this thing, of the plan, to kind of become part of our daily conversation. So that, you know, these types of things that we're talking about become the language that we're talking when we're doing any kind of planning or thinking about the future or what's going on today in component whatever. That will come in time, but we got to stick to the methodology. It does take time. It's not write the plan and walk away. This is how we're going to do business for a long time. We just have to stick to it.
Jennifer, you wanted to talk about, back up a little bit and talk about something.
Well, I wanted us to make sure that we're hitting this point, and we opened the conversation around what are your concerns or your fears, right, about what we're doing or why we're doing it. And I don't want to skip that, because I think it's important that if you guys have concerns or any fears about things that are going on, or you're just confused, this is the time right now, because we're going to move to another topic. This is a good time right now to bring those things up. And I just wanted to make sure that we're allowing you all the opportunity to address what are your concerns or your fears right now that we can help you with.
I think I hear a lot of people with just concern on the day-to-day level of this. What does this mean to me? How is it going to change how I operate, how I interact with my coworkers and other departments? You know, what's my PD going to say? Those are all the concerns.
So does anybody in the room have anything
comment?
to add to that?
Well, let me address that if I could, for AFRTS. What we want is for the product at the end of the day to answer those questions. I mean, just like we were talking about before, part of that is a process of creating the lexicon where we're talking to each other and we understand what it is we're talking about. When, you know, as Jennifer brought up, you know, people throw around initiative and project and program and, you know, all those things mean something different to people right now, because there's no common knowledge of what that terminology means across the DMA enterprise. At the end of this, at least this first stage, because this isn't, when we're done with this, this isn't the end of the process. This is the end of the beginning of the process, because this is going to set things up for us so it is clearer at the worker level of why they're doing what it is that they do. You know, we're just not there yet, but we're going to get there. And we can talk to each other in a language that we all understand, and we understand what those words mean. This is, for a lot of us, this is taking a foreign language course. At the end of the day, though, I don't think at the worker level a whole lot is going to change. The hard part is describing it in a document that allows people that don't know what we do to look at it and go, oh, okay, I get it. I see why you're doing this. But at the execution level, our job is going to stay the same. We're going to communicate the themes and messages of the leadership that we support. That's not going to change.
So Rick, one thing I will point out though that is going to change that I think public affairs community across the board struggles with, and that's we're going to have to measure. So there's going to be a metric involved, and that's how this plan is circling back, because everything's got to come back to what's the outcome desired, what's the result, and how does it point back to not only the components, you know, initiatives or goals and objectives, but the DMA goals and objectives. And if they don't, then you need to ask, why are you doing this? Because if customers, if there's not value there, then maybe we need to relook at it. And we haven't done in the past a good job with metrics.
Not so much what we do, but how we do it.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We have to provide value to various clients and, you know, customers and everything else. And we have to be able to show them. You know, prior to now, that was never an issue. The way we provided value was, oh, look what we did on this piece of paper. You know, and everybody was happy, yay.
I used those exact terms yesterday and they laughed at me, Rick. I'm glad you're with me.
Literally, nobody ever asked me, you know, in my years of growing up, well, who heard this or who saw this? Nobody cared.
No,
you know,
they do.
Now, they wanted it on a piece of paper of, look at the litany of stuff that I did.
I'd say that Pacific and Atlantic specifically have done a lot of work at moving that ball forward on their own.
Yes, absolutely.
And honestly, I look forward to again, it kind of goes back to technique of seeing what that is, and then being able to see like my tier 2 objectives and where they can potentially intersect. I mean, something went on the last couple of months that was kind of a great example of that was the Broadcast Center and DVI teaming up on delivery of the Navy entertainment DVDs to the fleet. We had no earthly idea, one, that there was so much physical media involved with that out at the Broadcast Center, and they're parked 10 feet away from the digitization people down there on my side of the house. And then back here at the headquarters, you know, Rick's office and mine are 30 feet away. We had no idea that he was cutting DVDs with a contractor that we can essentially do for free with my folks up at Toby Hanna. It's just that we really didn't have a way to look at, here are the top 10 things that DVI is working on. Here are the top 10 things that AFRTS is working on in plain language, so we can all, not just even within the lines of business, kind of look at that and say, you know what, I think I got an idea there,
Yeah, and that goes to one of our strategic initiatives is to develop a client performance management system so that there is visibility over what it is we're doing across DMA, so that we can see that, hey, I can support that.
Yeah, and that's why, like we were suggesting, when we send these out, you really ought to send out, particularly when you get the initiatives, they ought to, everyone ought to see everyone else's, just so we can see, feel over there, what's that all about, I want to work over there, they're doing cool stuff.
I want to stop doing this boring stuff here. I wanted to say, ask you something, because you mentioned that, what we do is at the level of what we actually are doing out in AFRTS isn't going to change. But I mean, I think that I'm going to ask you. I mean, some things are changing, right? I mean, we're still going to entertain and inform, right? That doesn't change. But
Right.
how we entertain
How we
and
do it
inform
is changing.
is going to change, right?
Yeah, the conversation isn't about what, it is about how, and addressing the efficiencies, just like what the Colonel just said. How many products are they producing, the folks out in the field producing that I can give more legs to the message by combining it with other functions here in the building? An example that happened while I was out in the Pacific. It was, I believe, it was Pearl Harbor Day. DoD production produced an infographic about Pearl Harbor that was absolutely stunning. I mean, it was a beautiful product. I had no idea they were doing it. And I just happened to be on an email trail that, it included it in there. And I looked at it and was like, oh my God, but we had no, like he said, the Colonel said, we had no way of being able to see that this was being done. And so I'm scrambling, trying to get this product out the Friday before, the Sunday that is, Pearl Harbor Day, because it was a great product. Luckily, in both the Pacific and Europe and out the broadcast center, we were able to leverage our social media capability to get that out. But I wonder, and it had some great hits. It was a very well received by the audience product. How much better could it have been if we had backed up the timeline, and interacted more with each other, to get that out in a little bit more efficient and effective way. Those are the things that are changing. The product itself, we're not changing. We're still communicating the requirements, but how we do that will change. We need to get better at those kinds of things. And a lot of this work will lead to that.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
All right, anyone else out in the virtual, any of our virtual participants, either on the phone bridge or DCS, do we have any questions? Any questions there, Ms. Jennifer?
Yeah, this is Rusty. We're talking about how we're going to communicate this, and I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is who is the audience, and one of the challenges we have out here in really communicating this is, half of our assignments in the entire Pacific region is 1-year assignment. So it's not like we have folks for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years even on station. So it's a very short amount of time that we have these folks. So that's one of the challenges that we have. Not saying we can't do it. It's just a pretty big challenge that we have out here.
How can we do that? How do you think we can do that better?
I think the main part is really tying the initiatives and the objectives down to the very lowest level, because if they're only here a year and they're in processing and out processing and so forth, that's the main thing that they need to know about, because that's going to really drive what their evals are and their tasks. So I think once we get a lot of clarity on the initiatives and objectives of how we're gonna go forward from a tactical level, I think that's really gonna help us.
And you know, one thing I was, this is Jennifer Braden again. You know, I was working on evaluation for an airman who works for me, and we were really looking at how does this one thing that she's in charge of or managing here impact the organization, and you know, taking that to the top in her Air Force evaluation, rather than just listing these things that she did. It was like an impactful statement. And I know that the services, you know, I'm saying this about the services because a lot of times we're focusing on our civilian performance evaluations and all that, but as a military person out there, that is a great way to look at how you're tying that back into what is the mission of the organization. Because if you're executing, you know, if you're creating product to inform on that line of business, and it is helping the organization to meet its objective or its vision, you can write those things into those evaluations, and that will help tie that person's job into the big mission of the DMA.
I think there are threads in our evaluation process for our service members that are there. It's just a matter of recognizing them and tying them more directly.
Right.
Which goes back to who need to do their job of making
Communicating
sure they understand what those
things are, communicating those things,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
So in February is when we start the 2 or 3 process by starting the training at the agency level as to how we can do this, and then that will take us. We're kind of on 3 tracks. We're on the track of working diligently to put in place our strategic initiatives at the agency level. We're working diligently to develop those initiatives at the Tier 2 level along with objectives. Now we're going to start the process of how do we move all that down to Tier 3. And so we'll start that here in February. So that's the next set of activities to move this forward.
Rusty, thanks for your insight on that. Just an example from my life. My replacement, my turtle, popped up on email, and everyone's gotten that email, right? Hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm coming to you. Tell me about yourself and what you do every day. And usually there's about 3 questions in there that are like personal questions, like how much do you travel, and you know, does your office have a nice view, or something like that. And then there's some stuff like what's going on kind of questions. I really think that 3 years ago, if I had asked that question and I came here and my predecessor had handed me what was our strategic plan, the 20-page glossy that, you know, had a lot of, you know, kind of read like the State of the Union, you know. I mean, but you know, we know what those documents look and feel like. But what I was able to send Colonel John Benedict was, dude, here's the scorecard, here are the initiatives I'm getting ready to go off on. Over to you come the summer. This is what you're going to be doing. This is what I'm signing you up for, dude. But, you know, that was I felt much better and in good conscience giving him something like that than because what he said in his email was, hey, I read the strategic plan online and I still had some questions. You know, because it's that portfolio document that's like sitting on somebody's coffee table, you know. And from a sponsorship perspective, you know, when you identify that airman, sailor, soldier that's coming to you, it would be fantastic, you know, to get that to them ahead of time and say, these are the things that the shop's doing, you know. I think that's great.
I do think, and that's a good point to bring up, and one of the things we're going to try to emphasize a little bit more is our onboarding process. So we've got to integrate that into onboarding.
Does anyone else out in the at the stations, AFN, Iwakuni, or any of the others, have any other suggestions on how we can communicate this? Because we're looking for ideas. The communication team, of which I am a member of, we were talking, the plan is predominantly very top-down driven, very leadership-driven. And so obviously we are looking for ideas on how we can better communicate our plan and how it affects you. So if you have an idea, and if you can't think of anything right at this moment, please feel free to email Julie.Briggs or go to the DMA, One Vision, One Voice. I think we have a strategy email address if you're looking for it. So just email someone, email your leadership, let us know, because we are trying to formulate a way to communicate this better. Because obviously if you have questions now, then obviously we've not been doing as good of a job as we could have.
Well, to address several of these issues, Rusty, one of the things, because of some events that happened, it looks like AFRTS is going to get a little bit more time available to us during the broadcast manager's course. And we're going to use some of that time to start talking these things at that course. Some people that, that go through the broadcast manager's course, this is their first time into AFRTS. So, we're not going to try to go 1,000 feet deep with it, but they need to start hearing the words and in the context of how those words are used, so that when they go out to the field and it is a conversation point with higher leadership, they have some kind of reference to understand what it means. So that's one way that we're looking at institutionalizing this process across DMA. I'm sure there's going to be other ones, but it was an opportunity, and we just decided to use it for that.
Talk about an innovative idea. I think that's great.
So the balanced scorecard training boot camp in early March and early April as well, coming up and staff meeting next week. The details of it. So that's an additional opportunity to get people through what Russ and Doug went through last year.
Only less painful.
Only less.
In only 18 days.
We're not 21.
It's one work week.
It just felt like 21 days.
What's the date on that one?
7 through 11 March,
Okay.
and 4 and 8 April. 4 to 8 April.
I want to bring up, we have a list of talking points here, and I think to help generate some more discussion, I think it would be helpful if I just listed them and talk about them. My question to everyone here in the room and those of us joining us virtually is, do you believe we're being transparent? Are we being open, direct, honest in our communication with everyone? And are we walking the talk? Do we invite and listen to feedback? Are we being collaborative? Are we helping people understand how this affects them?
And if we're not, how should we?
Exactly. So I just throw that out there as a point of discussion, and I welcome your comments. Anyone out in the field?
For those of you out in the field, what's your best resource of information?
I'm scared.
Is that Rusty? Define scared. What do you mean by that?
Elevated blood pressure.
Elevated blood pressure.
The Pacific calls it open kimono. They don't call it transparency.
Is that true?
That's what I heard.
Okay, one of the things that we've had discussions with people in the workforce here, and I don't mean to make anyone upset in the room, but what is it about what we're doing today that is requiring us to change? We've always been told we're doing great work. Why the necessity for change?
And I think that is actually a direct quote that came out of somebody in the workforce. So we're just relaying that out here. That's what they said. If you keep telling us we're doing a great job, why do we have to change?
Well, I mean, this is just my personal thought, but you're talking about, all this change taking place at DMA, and are we transparent? Well, so far we're still waiting on tier 3, and we're at the tactical level. So, to be honest, some of these other changes within DMA has not really hit us yet. We know the initiatives and the objectives of what we need to do, but we're at the tactical level. We're going to be kind of the vehicle to get us there. So in terms of I don't see it from my end. Maybe I'm the wrong person to answer this question. But I don't have a bunch of people come to me going, hey, they're not being transparent on the, the way forward with DMA, because we're not, in terms of being impacted, we're not quite there yet. Now, there may be a lot of questions once we get into tier 3 and we start going from a tactical level. That's just my what I see out here. And I don't know, Bucky, Korea may have a comment on top of that, and maybe my guys at Okinawa. But so far, that's what I see. We're waiting for the process to catch up to us.
Yeah, this is Bucky over in Korea. Yeah, I do have a comment on that, Rusty. And at the station level, I can tell you that we kind of feel like spectators sometimes looking up at the corporate level, because the discussion and the change and the evolution of DMA has not so far had a big impact on the way that we do business here. AFM's been around for a long, long time. What we do hasn't changed, and as Rick says, and I understand that the way we do it obviously changes with trends and, what the audience is doing and technology and whatnot. So yeah, I don't have a lot of the stations saying, hey, I'm a little concerned, I'm not getting enough information from DMA corporate. Maybe that'll change down the road, but that's not the case now.
Well, that's good. That's valuable information.
I think that Rick had made a good point too, and the Colonel really is making, that Rick made a good point. Write it down. Did you put it in your book? Okay, I'm saying this out loud. That just the most important thing right now is really communicating the terminology and making sure that you guys understand kind of what is happening, so that when it hits you, now you're not spending time trying to catch up on what does that all mean. What do you mean a line of business? What do you mean this? What does that mean? And how do I do that? Because it is going to eventually get there, and that is the terminology that's going to be used. I think maybe that is, where that communication kind of needs to push, so that we're all on the same page.
And let's talk about, unless anyone else has any input for that.
Yeah,
I just have one last point, and then we're going to go and we're going to open it up. We were talking about organization, the fact that we have 4 different generations now in the workforce. We have the baby boomers that were born between 1946 and 1964. And their major traits are that they're team-oriented, they're optimistic, they're work-centric, they look for opportunities for personal gratification, personal growth. Those are what they value. Generation X are people who were born between 1965 and 1976. They're very individualistic, flexible, but skeptical of authority, but very self-reliant, and they value fun and informality. Millennials, which are your Gen Y, were born between 1977 and 1993, and their major traits are they're very tech comfortable, connected, informed, civic-minded, family-centric, respect for diversity, they love diverse work environments, confident, and achievement-oriented. And then you've got your next gen, which is your Generation Z, those born after 1994. They're the workforce that is just coming in. They're the folks that are just coming into the workplace. And their major traits is that they have a mistrust in political systems, but they're always connected, and they are multitaskers. So what does this mean for us here at DMA? We have a lot of people coming in and working in an environment where we have 4 different generations. And how is that going to affect us? How are those generational differences affecting our communication efforts? Any thoughts on that?
I think that when we look at these different generations and their communication, the way that they communicate, I think it's important that we, as the people who are trying to push a message, right, and information, and I'm speaking internally and not as an external communication, because in AFRTS we have an audience, right, and we're communicating to them in a particular way, to those different audiences. But I mean, in the workplace for us, is really having an understanding of how is that next gen kid. Okay, I'm gonna call them kids. I'm older, so I can call them kids, right? Is an email getting to them? right? So I'm pushing an email, and is that gonna suffice, that communication? You know, I mean, my kid tells me, my son told me, I don't want to call somebody because that's rude.
Well, parents hear it all the time. Don't call me, text me.
Yeah, text me because calling me is rude.
I don't want
And
to
so
talk to you.
I think that we need to really think about, and we don't think about this very often, but thinking about that.
Go ahead.
On the line?
Anyone out there? I don't know if somebody was muting or unmuting their phone. So I think there's a lot of interesting points there in talking about different generations and how we communicate.
Let's,
YOLO.
Yeah?
yeah,
Go ahead.
We
We're
hear
here.
We hear you?
here. I think, I thought more about this question over the last two sessions, and now I guess I'm in a different mental place than I was yesterday.
Thank you.
The notion of who I'm communicating with needs to be addressed in the context of that question. All right, because it's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. So I kind of wonder, where are the millennials in the workforce? Because most of them are not in this building. They're out there in the stations. And should I even be worried about how I'm communicating to that, as opposed to how am I communicating with the next tier of management, which is likely not boomers, but millennials, you know, and how that trickles down to the people that are signing in that are junior officers, junior NCOs, junior enlisted. I think we corporately need to be careful that we're not trying to find the megaphone that hits everybody, because there isn't one.
No, I don't
And
think
it's
there is.
not my role to email crap out to DMA all and expect the message to get out.
Right.
So, sir, is that your question? This is Bucky over in Korea.
Oh, man, I'm
you know,
just pontificating, but shut me up. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I think that information comes down from your level, sir, and it hits people like, Mr. Barfield, and then there's a determination that has to be made as a leader as to, is this information that I need to digest by myself and take action on, or do I have to send it down further? And then when you get all the way down to the, senior airman or specialist broadcast journalist, I certainly don't think that they need to be overloaded with information from corporate.
Yeah, let me say one more thing about that quickly. Yeah, I'm not a public affairs guy, and I hear this statement an awful lot in this building. We communicate so poorly, and we're a building full of public affairs officers, or something like that. I think that is totally BS. Okay, it's BS because it's the wrong approach. This is not a public affairs strategy, it's leadership. There's a difference. So I think the day that I start treating you guys like an audience is the day I failed.
Amen.
All right, we're just about at the end of the hour. Go ahead, Barbara, did you have a comment?
Just on that note, one thing though that we could apply is, even when we're trying to, you guys are tactical, so when you're out there, a lot of bosses will come to you and say, I want a blog, I want a web page, I want social media to do this, that, or the other. But too often, what we're saying is, but who's it for? What are you trying to tell them, or what are you trying to say or communicate? And then what's the end result that you want out of that? And as soon as I ask those questions, it usually stops people and go, well, I didn't think about that. So that even applies to our communications internally as well as externally. So, something to think about in terms of, not just how we're doing it, but who we're talking to, because it matters with those generational changes. Not everybody's paying attention to email. Colonel brought up, we were saying, well, meetings, and he said, well, why do you have to have a meeting to share information? We need to be more creative. We need to get out away from our desks and talk to people and do more face-to-face. What a concept.
Barbara.
Yes.
I also think that that falls on local leadership too, to understand their people and how to get the message out to them. Well, not just.
Absolutely.
Like the colonel says a one size fits all, that I think, you go out to those local areas and those leaders know their people and know how best to communicate with them. And, you kind of give them some range to work with them.
Unless anyone has a burning desire to make another comment, I'd like to wrap up, because we're at the end of our hour. But I'd like to leave you with this thought before we leave. You, as an individual, can help us make change easier to understand and execute simply by talking about the change and becoming an agent for change. Change agents are those people who are credible, trustworthy, communication link between the planners and the implementers of change. So again, as you go back to your day-to-day grind, please remember that what we discussed here, and share this information with coworkers, and be an agent for change for DMA.
And let us know your questions and make us get you responses and answers.
So,
Thank
thank you
very
everyone,
much.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Julie Senatori.
She was our mole.
AFN Pacific Korea. AFN Iwakuni.
AFN Pacific.
Does anyone here in the room want to have an after action real quick about the event and the discussion and your thoughts, especially those of us that were here for the last 3 sessions and things that we can improve on and make it.
A quick AAR?
Yeah, it's 5 minutes.
Just a quick 5 minutes.
Capture.
I know, but I think it's important while it's fresh in our minds to do that.
Of the whole, all 3 things, or just tonight?
Tonight's, and then if you want
If there's
to.
anything-
Honestly, I will tell you that from yesterday morning to tonight, I think there was a huge shift. We learned a lot from, the first one to the second one to today, to now. I'm hopeful that there were questions answered, but I'm going to tell you what I think is the bottom line for me in trying to coordinate this is that this is not anything we've done before. And there's an effort here, and this shouldn't be the only effort that we make. And I think we need to continue down this road. It's probably not perfect. It's nowhere near perfect. But I think that it's a step in the right direction. And, we missed a lot of opportunities along the way.